The morning sun pierced through the gauzy curtains of a dimly lit hotel room, casting golden streaks across the tangled sheets where Eleanor Voss lay, her breath catching in her throat. She was naked, her skin prickling with the unfamiliar warmth of another body pressed against hers. Her heart thundered as she registered the weight of an arm draped across her waist, the soft rhythm of breathing not her own. Panic surged through her veins like wildfire. Eleanor Voss, the untouchable CEO of Voss Enterprises, a woman who'd built an empire on discipline and solitude, was lying in the arms of someone she barely recognized in the haze of her disorientation. Her mind raced, clawing through the fog of the previous night, flashes of champagne flutes, a company gala, and then, nothing. How had she ended up here? And who was this man, his face half buried in the pillow, his features softened by sleep? As her eyes adjusted, the truth hit her like a sledgehammer. It was Lucas Hart, her quiet, unassuming junior analyst. The room seemed to close in around her, the weight of her vulnerability suffocating. She was Eleanor Voss, pristine, powerful, a virgin by choice, her life meticulously guarded. Yet here she was, exposed in every sense, with no memory of how she'd crossed this unthinkable line. The scandal waiting to erupt could destroy everything she'd built. Her company, her reputation, her carefully curated identity, all teetered on the edge of ruin. But what happened next would not only shock her company but unravel the very fabric of who she thought she was, leading her to a truth far more powerful than her empire. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the courage to rewrite your story, please hit that like button, drop a comment, share this video, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support keeps these stories alive, and we'd love to hear how this one resonates with you. Eleanor slipped silently from the bed, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, her movements deliberate to avoid waking Lucas. Her clothes were strewn across the room, a silk blouse crumpled by the door, her heels tipped over near a chair. Each item felt like evidence of a crime she didn't understand. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling as she buttoned her blouse, her mind a storm of questions. Had she been drunk, drugged? Had Lucas taken advantage of her? The thought made her stomach churn, but the gentleness of his sleeping form didn't align with malice. Lucas Hart was a nobody in her world, a diligent employee who kept his head down, his reports flawless but unremarkable. He wasn't the type to scheme or seduce. So what had happened? She glanced at the bedside table, spotting her phone beside an empty champagne bottle. No messages, no clues. Her instinct was to flee, to bury this night and pretend it never happened. But as she reached for the door, Lucas stirred, his voice groggy but warm. She froze, unable to face him, and slipped out before he could fully wake. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into her own personal hell. She was Eleanor Voss, the woman who'd clawed her way from a small-town upbringing to the helm of a multi-billion-dollar tech firm. At 38, she was a legend, her name synonymous with innovation and control. Her virginity, a private choice rooted in her distrust of intimacy after a childhood marked by betrayal, was her armor. Now, that armor was cracked, and the vulnerability terrified her. Back at her penthouse, Eleanor scrubbed her skin raw in the shower, as if she could wash away the night. But the questions clung to her. She couldn't go to the police, her name in a scandal would tank her company's stock and invite media vultures. She couldn't confront Lucas without risking rumors spreading through the office. Instead, she did what she always did, she buried herself in work. At Voss Enterprises, she was a fortress, her office a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking the city. Employees whispered about her icy demeanor, calling her the Iron Virgin behind her back. She'd always leaned into that image, letting it shield her from personal entanglements. But now, every glance from a colleague felt like an accusation. Did they know? Had someone seen her leave the hotel? Her paranoia grew when she spotted Lucas in the break room, his eyes catching hers for a fleeting moment before he looked away. There was no smugness in his gaze, no hint of triumph, only confusion, maybe even shame. It unnerved her more than if he'd been gloating. She summoned him to her office that afternoon, her voice clipped over the intercom. When he arrived, his tie slightly askew, his nervous energy palpable, she didn't know whether to scream or demand answers. Instead, she asked about a mundane report, watching his every move for a clue. He answered professionally, but his hands fidgeted, and she saw the same questions in his eyes that haunted her own. They were both lost in the aftermath of a night neither could explain. Days turned into weeks, and Eleanor's life became a tightrope walk. She avoided Lucas, delegating his projects to other managers, but his presence lingered like a ghost. She couldn't shake the image of his arm around her, the unexpected tenderness of it. She began investigating discreetly, pulling security footage from the gala venue, scouring her phone for deleted messages, even hiring a private investigator to trace her steps that night. The footage showed her laughing with Lucas at the bar, her hand on his arm, her face unguarded in a way she'd never seen herself. The investigator found no evidence of foul play. No drugs, no coercion. Just two people who'd had too much to drink and made a choice they couldn't remember. The realization was both a relief and a new kind of torment. She hadn't been violated, but she'd let her guard down in a way she'd sworn never to do. Her carefully constructed walls were crumbling, and with them, her sense of self. At night, alone in her penthouse, she'd stare at the city skyline and feel the weight of her isolation. She'd built an empire but no connections, no one to trust with her fears. The loneliness she'd once embraced now felt like a prison. The turning point came unexpectedly. At a board meeting, a junior executive proposed a risky pivot in the company's AI division, one that could either revolutionize their market or bankrupt them. Eleanor, usually decisive, hesitated. Her mind was elsewhere, fractured by the hotel room mystery and her growing self-doubt. Lucas, unexpectedly present as a data consultant, spoke up. His analysis was sharp, his confidence quiet but unshakable. He argued for the pivot, citing data Eleanor hadn't even considered. The room turned to her, waiting for her verdict. She saw Lucas's eyes meet hers, not with judgment, but with a strange, unspoken understanding. In that moment, she made a choice. She approved the pivot, trusting his insight. It was a small act, but it felt like a surrender of her need for absolute control. The decision paid off. The pivot succeeded, boosting the company's stock and earning Eleanor praise as a visionary. But internally, she was unraveling. She couldn't keep pretending the night with Lucas hadn't changed her. She needed answers, not just about what happened, but about why it mattered so much. Eleanor called Lucas to her office again, this time closing the door. She didn't accuse or interrogate, she simply asked, "Do you remember anything from that night?" His face flushed, and he admitted he'd been wrestling with the same questions. He remembered fragments, her laughter, a shared dance, a moment of vulnerability when she'd confessed to feeling alone at the top. He swore he hadn't planned it, that he'd woken up as confused as she was. His honesty disarmed her. For the first time, she saw him not as a threat or a subordinate, but as a man carrying his own burdens. Lucas came from a working-class family, his career at Voss Enterprises a lifeline after years of scraping by. He'd admired Eleanor from afar, not for her power, but for her resilience. The night at the gala, he said, felt like a moment where they were just two people, not a CEO and an employee. Eleanor listened, her throat tight with emotion. She'd spent her life guarding against intimacy, but here was someone who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and didn't judge her for it. The conversation marked a shift. Eleanor began to let Lucas in, not romantically, but as a confidant. They met after hours, piecing together the night, but also sharing pieces of themselves. She told him about her childhood, how her father's betrayal had taught her to trust no one. He shared his struggles, the pressure to prove himself in a world that dismissed him as ordinary. Their talks became a lifeline, a space where Eleanor could be human, not just a CEO. The company noticed the change. Eleanor smiled more, listened to her team, even laughed at meetings. Rumors swirled, but not of scandal. People whispered about her newfound warmth, her openness. The Iron Virgin was softening, and the company thrived for it. The AI pivot became a global success, and Lucas was promoted, not because of favoritism, but because his talent shone through. Eleanor realized that the night she'd feared would ruin her had instead cracked open her heart, letting in trust, connection, and a courage she hadn't known she needed. By the time the next gala rolled around, Eleanor was a different woman. She stood at the podium, not as the untouchable CEO, but as someone who'd faced her fears and found strength in vulnerability. She spoke about second chances, about the power of trusting others, and the room fell silent, moved by her honesty. Lucas was there, in the crowd, his smile quiet but proud. They hadn't become lovers, but they'd become something rarer, true friends. The scandal she'd feared never came. Instead, the company rallied around her authenticity, and Voss Enterprises soared to new heights. Eleanor had woken up naked in more ways than one, stripped of her armor, but what she found in the aftermath was worth more than her empire, a sense of self that didn't rely on perfection. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of second chances and the beauty of human connection, please like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Kindness Speaks, and let us know in the comments below, what moment in your life taught you to let go and trust again. Your stories inspire us all.